This short one-session class is part of the Topical Studies on the Christian Life series of classes covering one topic out of each concentration of study in the College of the Bible. There are 10 studies in this series. This class is covering the College of the Bible's first track, which is Christian Ministry. The topic of this study is stewardship. Stewardship is an essential concept of the Christian life and, unfortunately, is often misunderstood by many Christians. There are several factors contributing to why this is the case. First, Christians have not always done the best job teaching or demonstrating this biblical principle. Second, the secular world has often used the church's missteps to ridicule the church and malign the true teaching. This has created a circle of problems that has led to many Christians never maturing in this area of their Christian faith. The secular world defines the church as always asking for money, so the church shies away from teaching this important principle, except when it's time to create next year's budget, and so seems to reinforce a secular worldview. This is why, unfortunately, many Christians today only associate the idea of stewardship with sermons they've heard about church budgets and building programs. However, the idea of biblical stewardship is about something much more expansive. It is about growing as a disciple of Christ and maturing in the Christian life. It is about Christian maturity, so it is a teaching not often grasped right at the start of a person's Christian journey, but is something that a Christian grows into. Let's begin in this short study to unpack the biblical idea of stewardship, and it is my prayer that this study will encourage you to learn more. Stewardship, at its most basic level, is simply managing someone else's resources. So the questions are, whose resources are being managed and who is the manager? As a start to answering these questions, we can turn to Psalm 24, where the psalmist begins with, "The earth is the Lord's, and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it." This reminds me of the creation story in Genesis. God creates everything and puts Adam and Eve in the garden to work it and to take care of it. It is clear that humankind was created to work, and this work is to be a steward of all the creation that God has made. This is the fundamental principle of biblical stewardship, the answer to our first two questions, and probably the hardest for us to comprehend. First, we are managing God's resources because God owns everything. And second, we are simply managers or administrators acting on His behalf. Well, there you have it. It is difficult for many of those who are young in the faith to understand this because the teaching of the secular world still clings to them as they enter this new life in Christ. The secular world teaches that what we gain in this life is by our own power and strength. It belongs to us, and we have every right to use it as we choose. As we mature in our Christian life, and we have been properly discipled, we come to realize that the Christian life is directly opposite of what the secular world teaches. As we grow in our understanding, trust, and obedience to God, our commitments begin to mature, a maturity that over time recognizes that being a Christian means not only giving oneself to God, but also our possessions to God for His service. This is mind-blowing truth, inconceivable in the secular world, and frankly often difficult for many Christians to comprehend. But it is truth nonetheless. A big facet of Christian maturity is acknowledging that we do not have the right of control over our property or ourselves. We have given this up to God. This has always been a stumbling block for people, and many have rejected or fallen away from the faith because of it. But the fact remains, stewardship acknowledges the all-encompassing teaching that everything is God's, and that God has placed things under our control for us to obediently manage. Stewardship is particularly difficult to live out in our day and age because we live in a society that is consumed more with rights than responsibilities. The secular often complains about rights being violated, and we have developed into such a litigious society that we are becoming experts in avoiding responsibility. In contrast, the Bible constantly asks us, What about your responsibilities? The difference is in worldview. The secular focuses on rights to own or do something. Stewardship focuses on our responsibilities to manage that which has been given to us. As a Christian, our worldview changes. We see our lives called as God's stewards to manage that which belongs to God. While God has graciously entrusted us with the care, development, and enjoyment of everything He owns, as His stewards, we are responsible to manage His holdings well and according to His desires and purposes. Another difference in worldview centers around the idea of accountability. The profane questions why someone would be accountable to another. It fancies the idea that accountability is some form of judgment, which hinders free expression and independence. But the sacred holds accountability supreme. We are all stewards of the resources, abilities, and opportunities that God has entrusted to our care. And one day, each one of us will be called to give an account for how we have managed what the Master has given us. This is the maxim taught by the parable of the talents. God has entrusted authority over the creation to us, and we are not allowed to rule over it as we see fit. We are called to exercise our dominion under the watchful eye of the Creator, managing His creation in accord with the principles He has established. Like the servants in the parable of the talents, we will be called to give an account of how we have administered everything we've been given, including our time, money, abilities, information, wisdom, relationships, and authority. We will all give account to the rightful owner as to how well we managed the things He has entrusted to us. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 through 24, Paul writes, "Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve." The Bible shows us in the parables of the kingdom that faithful stewards who do the Master's will with the Master's resources can expect to be rewarded, incompletely in this life, but fully in the next. We all should long to hear the Master say what He exclaims in Matthew 25, verse 21. His Master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful steward. You were faithful with a few things, I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your Master." As Christians in the 21st century, we need to embrace this larger biblical view of stewardship, which goes beyond church budgets or building projects, as important as they may be, and sees everything we do as connected with what God is doing in the world. We need to be faithful stewards of all God has given us within the opportunities presented through His providence to glorify Him, serve the common good, and further His kingdom. Hopefully, this short class gave you an opportunity to reflect on stewardship and your part in it. But remember, there's a lot more we can learn about the steward's life. So, I encourage you to continue to mature in your faith by learning more about stewardship.